Alright, so my name is Dusza, and this is my author discussion on the criteria of Negro art by W.E.B. Du Bois. Alright, so first we're going to start out with a little bit about the author. So William Edward Burgart Du Bois was born on February 23rd of 1868 in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Du Bois was the first person in his family to attend high school and graduate. So in Du Bois' early life, he didn't really encounter a whole lot of racism. He grew up in a more European community, so although he did go to an integrated school, there wasn't much racism that he encountered there. So Du Bois moved to Nashville, Tennessee to attend Fisk University. And that was a school for all black students, and although that was the case, this was the first time that he encountered a decent amount of racism in the form of Jim Crow laws, which ended up sparking his interest in racism and African American rights. So Du Bois enrolled in Harvard University in 1888. And he received advanced degrees in history while he was there. And then he began his study abroad at the University of Berlin in 1892, where he studied under several prominent social scientists. Du Bois then began his writing career with the suppression of African slave trade to the United States of America. And while working at the University of Pennsylvania, Du Bois published the Philadelphia Negro, which was his first really prominent work in 1899. Du Bois' claim to fame really came, though, once he openly disagreed with Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise, which stated that education and accomplishments would prove the worth of blacks in America and help elevate them to equality in that time frame. After that, he began working with several other activists and eventually publishing The Souls of Black Folk. He also went on to co-found the National Association of Advancement for Colored People, and later died in 1963 at the age of 95. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get into his little piece, The Criteria of Negro Art, which was published in 1926. All right, so the first topic that Du Bois really tries to break down is what is definition of beauty and who defines it. So Du Bois believes that beauty is being determined by the standards rather than the eyes of the beholder. And he believes that beauty has no real set definition. For example, early in his piece, Du Bois describes a wonderful scene in nature with various colors, sounds, and emotions. And then he goes on to explain that the beauty is often overlooked by many Americans. And here's a little quote from that piece. "Such is beauty, the world is full of it, and yet today the mass of humans are being choked away from it and their lives distorted and made ugly." So Du Bois elaborates by saying that the average white American has been made blind to art by their flamboyant and luxurious lifestyles, and that the African American race offers a fresh and new perspective, but it is often overlooked by most people. So another little piece that Du Bois brings up within this topic is that truth and beauty are very often intertwined. And then here's a little quote about that. "Somewhere eternal and perfect beauty sits above truth and right I can conceive. But here and now in the world in which I work, they are for me unseparated and inseparable." So he uses that concept to explain that beauty often comes from past experiences, good or bad. So African Americans should use their past experiences with racism and all the harsh treatment that they encountered in the time frame to bring their art to a new standard of beauty. But what we're going to get into next, this form of beauty is often, it was stifled by the standards that there were in America at that time. So that brings me into the next point here. Art is propaganda. So this is a very brief point brought up by Dubois in here. So I just want to start off with a quote. "I stand in utter shamelessness and say that whatever art I have for writing has been used always for propaganda, for gaining the right of black folk to love and enjoy." So, according to Dubois, since truth is justice and beauty is art, then art must be one in the same with justice. Therefore, art is propaganda for justice, which kind of relates back to the truth and beauty point, because the truth within the art makes it propaganda. So Dubois then goes on to explain the dilemma that black folks face in America. Their art is often prejudged because of the racism and prejudice that is present at the time. The public demands propaganda for one side, and then denies it to the other side, which Dubois doesn't see that as right at all. So, which brings me to the next quote. "I do care when propaganda is confined to one side, while the other is stripped and silent." So he's just kind of showing the prejudice and unfairness there. So now we're going to go into the next and final topic that Dubois kind of highlights here. So African American art should highlight the humanity of the artist, but often goes unrecognized. So there's two big points that Dubois brings up. It's that true art is not accepted, number one, and the humanity of the artist is often not recognized. So the main reason for this topic is just the overall prejudice that goes on with the publishers during this time frame. So the public demand at the time was for, it filtered work so that it made African Americans seem inferior, and any work at that time that didn't represent that was just kind of swept under the rug and not even looked at. So demand of the 19th century was not for truthful representation of Negroes. African American artists who were successful enough to have their works published were very restricted. And then the humanity of the artists is often never recognized. And an example that Dubois used in his piece was the example of Roland Hayes, who was a musician, and he tried to put his talent on display in America, but eventually had to move to Europe where his talent was recognized and he became very popular. And once that happened there, then America recognized his talent and was like, oh yeah, he's actually pretty good. So it took a whole other country to recognize the talent of a black man for America to realize that talent as well. So that kind of brings me to my final quote here. Until the art of black folk compels recognition, they will not be treated as human. So that's pretty much it for the analysis of this work. So in conclusion, there were 3 points that Dubois brought up that were really just the whole basis of the piece. And that was who defines beauty, artist propaganda, and African American art needs to be recognized, and the humanity of the artist should be highlighted. So here on the final slide, just have my work cited. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you.